My name is Mark Richardson, and I'm the Teen Services Librarian at the Cedar Mill and Bethany Libraries. I'm joined today by some other librarians around Washington County, and they have some responsibility for building graphic novel collections at their libraries. We're going to talk about graphic novels today, what we like, what's new, and why we like them in the first place. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves now. Ian, why don't you go first?
Yeah, my name's Ian Duncanson, and I'm a youth services librarian from the Beaverton City Library.
Jesse?
Yeah, I'm Jessie Castellanos, and I'm the Assistant Library Director at the Aloha Community Library.
And Adrian?
I'm Adrienne Driver. I am an Adult Services Librarian at the Tigard Public Library.
Awesome. Well, why don't we start with kind of why you guys are interested in comics and maybe what got you interested in comics in the first place. Adrian, why don't you go first?
I would call it my first furlough into comics. I read Calvin and Hobbes as a kid. I think every kid my age did. But what I would really say is that in like 7th grade, I started hanging out with this group of kids, and all they wanted to do after school was watch Sailor Moon. And so that was like the road into anime and manga, which is like a lot of stuff that I read. The first one that I found ever was at the library, just in the collection, not in its own graphic novel collection. And that was Battle Angel Alita. And after that, I was totally hooked. And then somebody else showed me American Comics with Sandman, and the rest is history.
Nice. Jesse, what about you?
I don't know. My start's kind of embarrassing. I was obsessed with like funnies in the newspaper when I was little, and I guess one of my first words was Garfield, but I called him Garfield Dog. And it's just sort of, I don't know why. That's what he was. So he's Garfield Dog. I was a very confused child, and from there it went to like grocery store, Archie comics. Every time I saw one, I had to have it. And as a kid, that was really all I read in terms of comics. I didn't really have my like graphic novel awakening until I was an adult. And my now father-in-law said I should read The Watchmen. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll read The Watchmen. And I loved it. And I was like, what the heck have I been doing for the last like 25 years of my life? Not reading graphic novels or anything like that. Got super into them. Then started watching anime as an adult too, and realized that I could get more of the story if I actually read the mangas. So I don't know, it's been sort of a really late in life revolution, but I always loved the stupid stuff you could buy as you were checking out at the grocery. It had stacks and stacks of Betty and Veronica, probably at my parents' house. Sorry, parents, but that's how it started.
Cool. Ian, what about you?
Well, I like Adrian, I got into it. I was into Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes as a kid. I don't know if I got all the humor in Calvin and Hobbes, but I loved it nonetheless. And then, going back and rereading as an adult, you catch all this stuff, like kind of like watching The Simpsons again as an adult, as opposed to when it was initially on. And then I went through a superhero phase in I think 4th, 5th, 6th grade when when DC did that whole Death of Superman thing. And I definitely got roped into that, and so I would go to comic book conventions with my friends, and like my brother and I were out. We would go every week to the local bookstore to see if they had a new comic book out in the Death of Superman storyline, because we were just so into that and seeing where it would go. And then I kind of I sort of just dropped off comics, I would say probably for middle and high school for a while. And then I got back into them again in college, reading stuff like Mouse and Blankets and some of the, more modern kind of modern classic ones that are more written for adults. So, I mean, all ages can read them too. So yeah, and that was when I kind of, I guess, rediscovered them as literature.
Cool. Well, you guys are all decidedly younger than I am, but I think I've been reading comics as long as I can remember, and mostly, yeah, it was like you go to the local convenience store and there'd be a bunch of comic magazines there, and I started with Spider-Man and Teen Titans and a bunch of stuff like that. But then, yeah, I remember it was the first comic book store that I'd ever seen. Somebody opened one up in Klamath Falls, which is where I grew up. And it was there for a little while, but I just remember going in there and seeing all these, older comics from the 60s and 70s, and just thinking, wow, I mean, there's just a ton of stuff out here that I didn't even know about before. And yeah, in particular, I remember like the Teen Titans in that guy's store, and it was the time when it was like mid 70s, and it was very gothic and dark, and the artwork was very ominous and kind of witchy, and there was one issue would have a dragon on it, and one of them would have turned into a witch, and it was very dark, and it kind of captured my imagination, of that small child in that small town. So yeah, I just kept reading, and and I stopped during college, high school and college. I kind of stopped reading comics, but then it wasn't too long before I got back into it as an adult, and I've been reading them ever since. But that's my story. It's pretty consistent throughout my whole life at this point. So with that said, and we may have touched on some of this, but I was sort of curious what some of your all-time favorites were, and maybe we can do one or two, and then we'll move to the next person. So Jesse, why don't you start?
Yeah, well, since I guess I'm kind of late to the comic scene, a lot of mine are more recent, but I fell in love with the Fables series by Bill Willingham initially, and that was kind of early on in my obsession with comics, and I just burned through every single one of them. I was lucky enough that by the time I got to them, they were all done, and I could get them as compendiums from the Beaverton library. Actually, I think is where most of them came from, and I just love that ability. I mean, I've always been kind of obsessed with fairy tale retellings anyway, and I love that they took it, and it wasn't really for kids. Obviously not for kids. It was gritty. It was sturdy. There was swearing. The big bad wolf was awesome, and but a real character, and they were all really real characters. I just fell in love with the illustrations as well, and then the spin-offs where they had guest artists were just phenomenal. Even the Cinderella side story where she's just, I won't say the word that's in my head, but she's awesome. And that was really a big start for me. And then from there, it kind of just devolved into whatever I could get my hands on. I have a background in art, so the more compelling the art is, the more detailed it is, the more I get sucked in, and then I always want to go and draw whatever it is I just read. I rarely do, but that was one where the illustrations really sucked me in. Another big favorite, and a really recent one that's still not done and it's on hiatus right now, is Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. I don't even have enough good things to say about it. It's just the most amazing story I think I've read in a really long time. I can't compare it to anything else because it's this amazing space epic that has romance and really weird giant spreads that I've never seen in any other comic book. And amazing art, amazing story. I'm really terrified to find out where it ends up because it's kind of got this potential Romeo and Juliet vibe going for it. And yeah, it's fantastic. And I hope that everyone gives it a try. Definitely 18 plus, but yeah.
For sure, yeah. Ian, what about you?
Well, I would probably start with the EC comics, the horror comics from the 50s and 60s. I was really into Tales from the Crypt during its initial run. Also, when I was probably too young to be watching it, admittedly. But I'm kind of an unabashed horror fan, so I really like those, and I like the history behind them. It's really interesting to actually read about that, the book censorship back then at the time, and the comics code controversy, and everything. And other ones that I've really loved are, Mouse is a true classic. It's the first graphic novel that I would say made me cry. Let me think. Watchmen is, some of the classics definitely. And then I would also mention, for a recent one, I really like My Friend Dahmer. Just not so much as a true crime story, but more as a story about awkward high school students in this sort of weird dark high school universe of the 1970s. And then I also really love some of the ones for teens that have come out too, like the Mariko Tamaki ones, and the Gene Yang ones I really like. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to show you guys some of the ones that are my favorites here. And I know on the podcast you won't be able to see this. So this is the omnibus for Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was a story that came out in the mid 80s, and it's kind of the first big crossover event that they had in the comics. The problem was they had all of these different realities in DC Comics, and it was getting too hard for them to keep track of. So they decided, okay, we need to fix this. And so they spent a whole year smushing all those realities together, and they called it Crisis on Infinite Earth. And a bunch of characters died, and it was just kind of something they'd never done before. It kind of blew my mind at the time, and and the artwork's amazing. There's so much stuff going on, and it's so detailed and intricate. That's partly why I have this giant copy of it, is so that I can just kind of open it up and remember all those stories I read when I was younger, and look at the artwork in super detail. So that's one of my favorites. A more modern favorite is Lock and Key, which they have made into a Netflix show. But it's, like Ian said, it's a horror comic. But the artwork is just phenomenal all the way through. And it's written by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son. And it's very creepy, but it follows this family after this tragedy befalls them, and they move back to kind of their ancestral home in New England somewhere. And it's called The Key House. And the kids in the family start finding these keys, and the keys all do different things. And it kind of unlocks all these different realities, and each key has a different power. And so the kids kind of discovering what each key's power is kind of the draw for that book for me, and it was really cool. And then another nonfiction one that I've read recently that I really liked is called Syllabus by Linda Berry. And it kind of looks like a binder with lines drawn through it. And it's basically based on a college class that she taught as an artist. And it's one of the best books that I've read that kind of describes the creative process and what you need to grapple with to create art of any kind. And I really loved reading that. It's pretty dense, but she really does a great job explaining, art and making comics and what has to go into that. So those are some of my favorites that I thought about for this. What about you, Adrian?
Another one I forgot to mention that I'm kicking myself for is Jimmy Corrigan, The Smartest Kid on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
That I guess that's kind of a modern classic too, but it's about this kid who I guess he's a grown man, but he's just sort of like lonely, lost, sad sack guy, and it goes back in time to the Chicago World's Fair and kind of shows his family. And so you sort of find out how he ended up this way, and it's kind of passed down the generations, and it's all centered around this story where he's meeting his estranged father and a sister he didn't know. So I recommend that too. Sorry, go ahead.
Cool.
Good. A lot of Alan Moore, Watchmen, like you guys said, and a lot of his other stuff, Swamp Thing. That was like when it really opened up, when because when you read him, you can kind of realize like, oh, there's all these other things you can have going in comics too. But my absolute favorite right now, and it's still publishing, is Land of the Lustrous by Hiroko Ichikawa. It is kind of like a post-apocalyptic Earth, and all the creatures that are residing on Earth now are mineral creatures. They're made of gems, so they can shatter really easily. And our main character is Fos. She's the weakest. She's also the youngest. And she's like really eager to change and finally find a job for herself. And it was introduced to a coworker, by a coworker to me as like a slice of life. It is not slice of life. Once you get past like the first like 8 chapters, like there's so much stuff that ends up going on. And like so much is changing constantly. And really, if you try to read into it, it's really about like Buddhism and humanity, feminism and society, even though like we're, you know, in a post-apocalyptic world where we don't even have humans anymore. And it is just like it's breakneck speed. You cannot keep up with what's going on because things change all the time. And that's what makes it so dang exciting.
That sounds really good. I think I'd like to read that one.
You don't know what you're getting into, but you should.
Yeah. How many volumes are we talking about?
They just published 11 in Japan. It is on hiatus here for publishing for about a year, is what it looks like currently. So we've got 10 volumes out here.
So I've got some time, is that what you said?
Yeah, got some time to process those 10 volumes.
Good, good. Okay, well, so those are some of our favorites. Let's talk about maybe something you've read in the past couple of months or during the pandemic that has been really good. Ian, why don't you start us off?
Sure, I can recommend the new Gene Yang book. It was really written for like more middle school and high school, but I mean I would recommend it to adults too. It's called Dragon Hoops, and it's about him. It's kind of a biographical story, but it's about him teaching at a high school. And he's always been, you know, more of an art and cartooning and book kind of guy, and he had no interest in sports. But then this high school team is about to go to the state championship in California. So it's about him sort of realizing that he wants to tell their story and having to learn about sports in the process. Great book. I recommend it if you're a fan of Gene Yang's other work or a fan of sports stories too.
Cool. Well, since you recommended one of his books, I'm going to go ahead and go. I read this one, Superman Smashes the Klan, also by Gene Yang, but he doesn't do the art on this one, which is interesting. The artist is Gurahiru, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. But I wasn't excited about this book, but I kept seeing good reviews about it, so I went ahead and read it. And boy, it was really phenomenal, frankly. Teens Roberta and Tommy Lee, they moved to Metropolis from Chinatown with their parents when their dad gets a new job, and this is set in like the 40s. And what follows is really a nuanced look at racism and prejudice and immigrants and what it means to be an outsider. And there's a lot of action as well. And, you know, Superman himself as a character is kind of forced to look at who he is and why he's hiding his own immigration status from the rest of America. Because in the story, they don't know that he's an immigrant. So it kind of concludes with him revealing that. And then the whole last part of the book, there's a big long essay by Gene Yang about the Superman radio show in the 40s and kind of how it took on the Klan in the radio show and all this history that I had no idea about. And, you know, I was pretty fascinated by the end of the whole story. So this is a great book for middle schoolers and high schoolers, I would say. Jesse, what about you?
Typical me, I love the fairy tale retelling. So I just read Cheshire Crossing, which is by Andy Weir. And I didn't make the connection as I was reading it that he also wrote The Martian because it's so completely different than The Martian. But I thought that was a really interesting choice for him to write a story, which is essentially a meeting of the worlds for Wendy from Peter Pan, Alice from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and who else was it? I can't think of her name right now. But anyway, so these, and Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. So these three characters are sent to this school for troublesome girls, essentially, because they've all been pegged as sort of mentally ill their entire lives because they have these magical worlds that they visited, but no one in their world believes them. So they're sent to this school, which turns out to be a school to teach them how to use their magical powers that allow them to get to these other worlds. So really cool kind of superhero-y vibe where they end up having to travel through all of their different worlds using their special powers. So Alice goes through a mirror, Dorothy clicks her magic shoes, and Wendy can fly. So they all have their different ways of getting there, and then they go on adventures. I think it's supposed to end up being a series. They kind of ended it on a potential there will be more adventures of these three girls, and I really liked their the characters and the way they developed them. They're not like your they're not as static as they are in their sort of classic literature form, and it was really fun read, and I really liked that one a lot. Also mention one thing that I have been doing that's kind of a different look into comics for me. I've gotten really obsessed with webtoons, which are it's a virtual comic platform, and I got sucked into it one day because of a story or a comic that's an ongoing called Lore Olympus, which is kind of a reimagining of the story of Hades and Persephone, but in a modernized version of Mount Olympus, essentially. So the underworld, Hades is like a corporate tycoon, and all of it's handled like business, and it's really interesting. Like all of the main characters are sort of like CEOs, like so all of the main gods are these big businessmen, and it's really a cool adaptation. The colorization is beautiful. It's really unique. They're all kind of these bright neon colors. So like Persephone is pink, Hades is blue, and like it's really beautifully done. And I just heard that it's going to be adapted into a Netflix series, which is super exciting. And I know I highly recommend it. It was a totally different platform for me, but it's been very addictive.
What was the name of that one again?
That was called Lore Olympus, and I think the author is Rachel Smith.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I didn't see
Adrian,
that.
what about you?
I didn't read it, but I've got it like on a bookmark, and I'm gonna read it someday.
You're not going to be able to stop. Let me warn you.
I don't want to read it because I'm like got a million other things to read. I've been reading Saint Youngman by Hikaru Nakamura, and basically Jesus and Buddha have come to live in an apartment in the 21st century, and it's just a comedy about like all the stuff that they get into like around in their neighborhood and like the hobbies that they develop while they're on Earth, and it's extremely silly. And you can definitely tell that the translation is a labor of love. Like in the beginning, the translator is like, look, this wasn't translated, and I brought it to the British Museum of Art because I loved it so much. And we did like a whole room on this comic before it was even translated in English. And so there's like a million annotations, and it's just really fun to read. And the other one I read really recently that I liked was Ben Passmore's Your Black Friend and Other Strangers. And it's just, I'm running Racial Justice Book Club right now, so I'm reading a lot of things along those lines. And it was really interesting to see his take on like racism and isolation and alienation and friendship with white people in particular. And so those are the two.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I'll mention another one. I read it a couple months ago. It's called Little Bird by Darcy Van Poelgeest and Ian Bertram. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but and I think they are Canadian writers and artists. But it was really a beautiful book that's reminiscent of Frank Quietly. I don't know if any of you've seen his work. But it's set in a dystopian future where an amped up American religious autocracy invades and subjugates Canada. This lone girl with a mysterious history rises to lead a resistance. It's really violent, so it's definitely for adults. And death is everywhere, and it's kind of heartbreaking. And the death is kind of meaningful and meaningless all at the same time. It's a very different book, but I would say it's definitely worth a look if you're up for that type of tale. Definitely for adults. Okay, and I don't know, I put changes in the comics industry as sort of something to talk about. I've been kind of watching during the pandemic what's happening to some of the publishers. And it's fairly interesting, but I don't know if any of you have seen any of that and had any thoughts on what's going on.
Everything I want to buy is delayed, and I hate it.
Yeah, I've noticed. I order all the teen manga for the Beaverton library, and I've noticed that a lot of those have gotten delayed lately too. And we've had like a long holds line, I think, for the new Maximum Ride manga adaptation forever, and it just keeps getting pushed forward. It's now February of 2021. So I keep waiting to be able to actually buy that too.
Well, they've got 3 or 4 other versions that they can read in the meantime, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching. There's a lot of drama with DC Comics happening right now. Um, they are they are they are
Man,
owned. Oh, what'd you say, Adrian?
like killed the new Sandman line basically, which made me really sad. I think like one of them is going to continue to publish out of 4 that they started.
No, really? Did they cancel the other 3? Yeah. Yeah. So they've had layoffs. AT&T owns DC Comics, and they're a fairly recent owner of them. And so they are making a bunch of changes. And so all these publishing initiatives that they started, like the Black Label and some other things, I think are maybe over, even though some of them are successful. So it's going to be really interesting to see where they end up at the end of this. I think they are very heavily invested in some of the teen books that they've been doing. So I think that's going to be something that they continue to do, but whether they, what happens with like the monthly comics that come out, I really don't know, because they seem less interested in what's happening there. So yeah, lots of changes there to keep an eye on. And I know Marvel's canceled a bunch of books too, but they're not in as dire straits as DC is at the moment, it seems like. So yeah, interesting time to be a comics fan, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I do think, like Josie mentioned, there's a lot of interesting things happening online with webcomics. And, maybe we'll talk about this in a minute, but just how popular comics for kids are is kind of a real eye-opener lately. What are your patrons responding to regarding comics over the last year? Jesse, why don't you start?
Yeah, one thing that I've seen an uptick in that I think is really cool is this sort of renaissance of like middle grade and middle school comic books that are realistic fiction stories. Like I think Raina Telgemeier largely can be blamed or thanked for starting that. And it's really interesting to see it kind of started as a middle school story because it's about a middle school student, and then the kids who are interested in it range anywhere from like, I don't know, third graders all the way through, and they really find something in these stories that mean something to them, and I think they can see a little bit of themselves. I think they see characters that are really cool and really real, and having them visually represented as opposed to the classic realistic fiction, I think resonates with a lot of kids and adults too. And her series has sort of launched a whole range of other books that are really similar, that are really cool, that represent this amazing range of diverse characters as well, which I think is really great to see, especially in comics, as they sort of evolve from being pretty one note to just embracing a totally different genre. Like I can't really think of a lot of realistic fiction comics that were popular, especially for kids, before that. So it's been really neat to see those. I'll also add, now that I'm back in the library and doing check-in regularly, that a good like quarter of the items I check in on any day are comic books, and a lot of those, probably the majority of those, are kids' graphic novels, which is really cool. Just it's very colorful as well. There's stacks of all these different artists on top of each other. It's really fun to look at, and I think that's really great to see. It kind of gives me hope that parents are moving away from this sort of aversion to letting their kids read graphic novels that's been pervasive for a long time and never really made a lot of sense. I would think if your kid's reading and that's what they want to read and they don't want to read anything else, I would never discourage that. But there's been this mentality that a comic book or a graphic novel isn't truly reading. It doesn't help with their comprehension. I don't know what all the arguments are, but that's been pretty common. And I still hear a lot of, well, you can get one comic, but you have to get 2 chapter books that come in every once in a while. Even doing curbside, that comes up every once in a while. And with some of the book giveaways that we've been doing for our summer reading prizes are comic books. So we have a lot of parents who are like, we don't read those. And I'm like, are you sure though? But have they actually tried them? So I don't know, there's been some sort of evolution in logic there, but I don't think we're quite to where parents think it's the best idea yet. There's more of them that do, obviously, because there's more getting checked out, which is great. And especially when it's harder to check out than it used to be. They're still getting their hands on them. So that's really wonderful to see.
Yeah. I was just thinking that as hard of a time as a lot of people and kids are having reading anything right now. Having a graphic novel that's kind of an intermediary, if it's difficult to concentrate and read text, that would be a good thing at this moment in time, I would think. Ian, what about you? What are you seeing?
Well, yeah, I can second what Jesse said. That the Raina Telgemeier is great, and then also the Svetlana. I'm probably mispronouncing this name wrong, but Svetlana Shimakova. Um, I think it's called the Berry Brook Middle School series. It's like Awkward, Brave, Crush. Those are great middle school books, diverse characters, real issues, but also uplifting at the same time, without being overly didactic. And then also there's the Sunny series by Jennifer L. Holm. That's another middle school one, which realistic situations and characters that seems to be really popular at my library. Another series that has actually been growing in popularity is that Dawn of X. I think there's 10 of them. That series of X-Men graphic novels. I just had to rush order all of those because a bunch of them had different holds on them. So which shows me that there's some demand for them out there. I have not read them yet though.
Yeah, I thought about mentioning House of X, which is the first one in that series, because he just kind of wipes the table and restarts everything for the X-Men, and I think that's why you're seeing so many holds on it, because it's pretty interesting what he's done. Yeah. I don't know that I can fully describe what he does with the X-Men, but he's basically set them up in their own country, and they're all on an island together, and he just kind of takes it from there. As what if the X-Men created their own country and acted like a sovereign nation? So
cool.
And everything changes. They figure out a way to, well, this is kind of a spoiler. So spoiler, if anybody's going to read this, stop listening right now. They figure out a way to use their powers to reincarnate each other. And so they're able to bring back all of the dead X-Men and start over. So, and that's just one of the kind of crazy things that he brings back to the X-Men. So, yeah. I don't know where it's going to end up, but if you like the X-Men at all, it's kind of worth taking a look at. Adrian, what are you seeing as far as what your patrons are checking out?
Since I'm upstairs with the adults, and they moved the teen books downstairs, which made me really sad because I can't look at them all the time. I see like a lot of stuff about like shows and movies goes out. Battle Angel Alita is really popular right now. I'm not sure how I feel about that, being a longtime fan. Umbrella Academy, but we also do like a lot of the what I consider biographical things, like March is Always Gone. And one that I'm always surprised about, like all sorts of patrons will come in and they're looking for My Brother's Husband, which is, I can't remember the author, but I know, it was so cute. I loved reading it.
So cute.
But like that one, I don't think ever stays on our shelf. I think it's almost always out. And then like whenever it is in for like 2 seconds, somebody will come in and they'll come up to the desk and they're like, I don't know where the graphic novels are and where's My Brother's Husband? And so that's really interesting to see. And like stuff like Bingo Love is always going out as well. But again, since our collection is small, I don't really get a good sample size.
That's right. My Brother's Husband's weirdly popular. Not, I guess weirdly, but surprisingly popular at our library, our little teeny tiny library where I only have like 3 of them because my graphic novel budget's like, but they're never on the shelves and they go out all the time. It's really cool. Like slowly adding to it as I can, and when Baker and Taylor isn't sold out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Got known from the general public, but it sure is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one that I'm really looking forward to is Flamer by Mike Curato.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, so I think it's a semi I haven't read it yet, but it's on my holds list and I'm eagerly awaiting it. It's been a buzz book, but it's a semi autobiographical book about him going to scout camp in the 90s is this sort of, confused about his sexuality, kind of thinking he's gay, but not out or anything like that yet. And just, getting horribly bullied there. And so it's kind of about his, sort of growing into himself and understanding his sexuality. I've heard there's a lot of, triggery things, and it's very frank about its discussions. But I've read pretty much nothing but good things so far about it.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to mention New Kid as well. I think that's been a real big hit over the last year. And I thought it was great when I read it. It's about an African-American kid who's at a mostly white school, a private school, if I remember correctly, and kind of what his experience is like there. And the one passage that just like seared into my memory when I read that book was when he goes into the library, and the librarians, there's one other black kid there, and the librarian's trying to give both of them all of these gritty, real novels about the black experience, and they're just like looking at each other. It's like, we want a book with the black Harry Potter man, we want something fun and escapist, but with a black main character. And I was just like, yeah, that's right. We need to do a better job about making sure that those type of books are there for kids to check out. And so I've really tried hard after reading that book to find those type of books for the library. But I thought that one was really great. And I guess he has a follow-up coming out in October called Class Act or something like that. So I'm looking forward to that one.
I'll share a cute story about New Kid. That was one of my first curbside interactions when we reopened the library for curbside. I checked it out and delivered it to an older woman who was waiting outside and said, "I'm so excited to read this. I've heard it's really good. I'm working my way through every Newbery ever." So she showed me her like giant list of every Newbery ever, and she was really excited to read it. And I was like, "Well, you're gonna love it. I hope you enjoy it." And she took it, and then like a few weeks later, it was in the check-in bin, and I happened to be checking it in, and she stuck a sticky note on the front that said, "I loved it." And I just thought that was a really sweet interaction that was as close to like a real life interaction as we've had in a while. And then she had obviously impacted her greatly, and she really enjoyed it. I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw some teachers talking on Twitter, and one of them was asking, what would be a good graphic novel if you were going to have all the freshmen read one thing? And like the overwhelming consensus was New Kid, which was cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, that was a great one for sure. I'm also looking forward to the graphic novel adaptation of Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. It's coming out shortly here. Really powerful book.
Yeah, that would be one to look for as well.
It's going to be one of those gritty ones though too. But I completely agree with the point he makes in New Kid, is that you've got to have like good escapist adventure books and things like that featuring characters of color too.
Yeah. Well, let's go around and talk about our libraries and what's happening at each of them, so that people know what services we are offering at the current strange moment in time. Adrian, what's happening at Tigard?
We have started curbside like reference and pickup. So, and we're moving away from appointments starting on Monday, the 31st or the 1st or whatever it is. And then basically you're just able to drive up and you give us a call in your car and you tell us like what your library card number is, and we'll go find all your things and bring them out to you. There's also going to be a service desk outside that can pull holds as well. And just lots of ways to get your holds. We also started 2 brand new services during quarantine. One is your personal librarian, and basically we'll curate a list of items that we think you'd like if you tell us like what you've been reading and what kind of genres you like and things like that. And it's been a lot of fun. We also started a book stack service. So basically, again, like if you just tell us like, hey, I read New Kid and I want books like New Kid. And so we'll find them in the library and we'll put them on hold for you, so then you can come pick them up. And we do have take and make bags, which is like the takeaway craft. I don't know what it is for September, but I know that it's an all ages thing, so anybody can come and pick it up.
Cool. Jesse, what about Aloha?
Yeah, so we're doing curbside as well. Our library is a little different. It's in a strip mall, if you know us as a patron. So to pick up your books, you come up to a little table in front of the library. We see you, we bring them out, after we check on your name. Super easy. Or if you need assistance, you can call us and we can bring them out to your car as well. We've been doing that for a while, so we're finally getting the hang of it, and then we're probably going to change things. Right now, it does require an appointment, but I think we're going to be moving to no appointments in the very near future, so that should be another change to look forward to and hopefully ease access for some people. We do that 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We're also doing some take and makes right now. We have weekly ones for kids for the month of September in various formats. So the current one is a Storytime Essentials Kit, which is pretty exciting, where you can get everything you need, like shakers and scarves, to join us online for story times, which is really fun. We have a lot of virtual programs that we're doing, including story times. There's some adult craft or noon programs that are coming up, which will also have a take and make that goes with it for you to pick up at the library during curbside. What else are we doing? We another fun thing you can do, we're doing dial-in book excerpts. So if you call one of my coworkers' numbers, and I don't have it memorized, but if you call her number anytime during the week, she'll read an excerpt of a book for you, which is really fun. And I think hopefully starting soon, we haven't got it launched yet, but we'll be doing some sort of book bundle browsing service where you can request a list or a series of items based on your interests, and we'll put those together and place them on hold for you. So that's what we've got going on now. It could change in the next day or two, but stay tuned.
Yeah. What about you, Ian? What's Beaverton doing?
Well, we're finishing up summer reading. I think actually next week is going to be the last week of our summer reading prize pickup for kids and teens, both by appointment and by walk-up. So probably by the time people hear this, it may be over. But in addition to that, we have the phone answers, and we also have the holds pickup for curbside appointments right now. And we're looking into getting a walk-up element of that. We have a computer lab currently 2 days a week by appointment. So this is all linked off of our website, beavertonlibrary.org, and the current services. And then we're also going to be getting take and make crafts off the ground week after next, and that's going to include an activity for adults that can be picked up. So we're going to have a kids one, a teen one, and an adult one, and we're hoping to rotate those out every 2 weeks. And then we, of course, have Zoom events and story times. So for teens coming up in the fall, I've got a couple of college talks. Like one of them is applying during COVID, and one of them is writing a college app essay. I think you're familiar with that because you recommended the people to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been kind of just reinventing ourselves regularly this summer, and it's been stressful, but it's been great. We've had really good feedback from the community too. And we're picking up real-time reading recommendations on Facebook again. We took a break during August for that, but we're starting that up again. I think the second week of September. So yeah, that's kind of what it is right now. We're sort of expanding things. So we're going to be expanding the holds and adding that walk-up element, and then also hopefully expanding the computer lab more too, because that's been consistently booked up and really popular too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great that you're able to offer computer access right now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of them.
Yeah, I was going to say Cedar Mill, we're doing similar things to most of you. There's lots of online story times. A lot of them are recordings that are getting posted. We are doing curbside with appointment currently, and we will also be moving soon to just a drop-in appointment where if you have something on hold, you drop in and we'll go get it for you. We have a hand-picked book service where people can fill out an email form on our website, and then we will compile a bunch of books based on things that you've liked in the past, and then they'll place them on hold for you. And then I think we're going to start something called book bundles, which is similar and different than some of what other people are calling book bundles, but basically it's 5 books that are similar, and they're in a bag, and when you come to pick up your holds, if you want to take one of those, we'll check that out to you too. So we haven't really started that yet, but I think that's coming in the next couple of weeks. So that's what Cedar Mill and Bethany are doing.
Yeah, I completely forgot to mention that, Mark. The book bundles have been huge at Beaverton. We've served over 10,000 so far. And right now it's mostly well, yeah, it's pretty much all kids bundles right now. But we're working on we're going to be adding adults and teens bundles for adults and teens really soon too. But yeah, we hit our 10,000 just at the end of last week, which was a big milestone. We had donuts and everything.
No, nice.
Yeah, so we have a huge variety of kids bundles to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear all the ingenuity that different libraries are coming up with to try and serve our patrons right now. I know it's a trying time, but pretty much everybody that I've talked to is pretty happy that we're open at all and trying to get stuff to them. So kudos to all of us for doing that.
Definitely.
Well, I appreciate all you guys coming to talk about graphic novels. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to all of the great books that you guys have liked in the past. And I'm going to look forward to making a list and maybe reading some of these myself.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I could talk graphic novels all day.